This is the GoBar Kensei. It's actually lent to me by a friend. I just only have its kind of leather case and the cables that it comes with. And he asked if I wanted to check it out when he got back from his summer vacation. You actually may know him. He's Stefan from Non-Audiophile Tries, expensive headphones video, or 4,000. I think it was $4,000 headphones, I think I said at the time. But do check that out. It's probably my most popular video. Anyway, he ended up buying a GoBar Kensei after borrowing my Luxury and Precision W4. Actually, not mine. It still technically belongs to Luxury and Precision. And, well, I reviewed this thing back in the day, and it's a very well-known and actually similarly priced dongle DAC where you plug it into your, well, it's designed to plug into a phone, essentially, but it does have a fair bit of power output. And they have very similar kinds of power output in terms of somewhere around 400 milliwatts. But you couldn't have maybe a more different kind of setup. The Luxury and Precision W4 is well known for its 4 Cirrus Logic DACs that are inside. And Cirrus Logic DACs are what is most common in dongle DACs these days, is they just happen to make a very good sounding, well, basically DAC for use in phones, and which with a little bit of better electronics can end up sounding better than the DACs in a phone. And so they bundle these into various devices. And putting 4 together, of course, you get better sound quality, technically as well as sonically. However, iFi are well known for their Burr Brown DACs, although you can't fit a modern Burr Brown DAC inside something this size. It just is not going to happen very readily. So they've gone for Cirrus Logic as well, but they've managed to keep all their usual features, which are in this very heavy thing. I mean, they do have a regular GoBar, which has all but one feature as far as I know, and if they can get the light to not shine so that you can't actually read any of it, it has a whole bunch of stuff crammed on the back, including the old extra bass, extra space, and actually something we saw in the Valkyrie, the K2HD system, which in non-high-res music, or anything that's up to a certain point, will add back supposedly some of the sound that is normally above the normal hearing range, but ends up making things sound slightly more maybe tubey or harmonic, if you like. And it has good old IEM match built in there, which you can actually switch between the 2 output ports, either the 3.5 or the 4.4 millimeter. And so in the end, well, let me show you some of the stuff that it has if I plug it in. When actually using it as a dongle DAC, if you can see the lights there, you have the volume control uses the regular lights, so you can actually see roughly what volume you have as it goes up. I don't know how many steps it has. It doesn't really indicate this, unlike most of the other dongle DACs which you have, because it doesn't have a screen of any kind. But if you long press the power button, the menu or whatever access button to switch things, it will allow you, using the volume down button, to switch the filter, which is showing next to the MQA light at the moment. Depending which color you set, it goes between yellow, red, green, and white. You get one of iFi's regular filters. This is the white, I remember, is the GTO filter, which they like. And they have standard and bit perfect, which is not oversampling, and one other which I've completely forgotten, but yeah. Then you can switch on and off the K2HD with this button here, whether you like that or not. And then back out of that, which takes 3 seconds of pressing. Come on, go back. And if you press this, it switches between the extra bass, extra space, or both all together, if you can see that showing up at the bottom there. The problem with this button is, if you have this and you accidentally bump this, you could end up getting extra bass or extra space running when you don't want it. But it does indicate at least the sample rate that's incoming. If the top light is lit up, it's PCM, and then it's the scale is on the left, and if it's DSD, the scale is on the right, and there's one for MQA as well. In the end, I think you all care about how good it sounds. And the sound actually isn't that radically different depending on the filter options you choose, or the options you choose for on the back, as it is in something like the Valkyrie or any of other iFi's Burr Brown / Texas Instruments based gear. And so comparing to something like the W4 or the QX13, which I have a review of as well, they are fairly close in being very clear sounding. And I'd probably say that the Kensei is closest to the W4, and the W4 probably sounds a little bit more, it kind of gets out of the way of the music. If you have the fast filter on and you have tune 02, which is supposed to be more for clarity, it ends up getting kind of out of the way of the music, and the musicality comes through from the music a little bit more, with that slight coloration you get from Cirrus Logic DACs. The Kensei, on the other hand, especially if you add in the K2 and so the GTO filter, that ends up going for a little bit more musicality and ends up, providing musicality. And it without comparisons, when you plug in headphones or IEMs, it does sound very good. The problem with this, the Kensei, is that, so it has the IEM match on there. But with things like, still have the good old Solaris from Campfire Audio, which I've had for a number of years now. These are very, very sensitive, and I do really like them, but I do also use them for testing gear such as this, to test how it works with extremely sensitive IEMs. And with that, with something like, say, the QX13 or the W4, with the W4, for example, there was, if I play a song, a track I made, which is complete digital silence, basically all it's designed to do is get the amplification circuit in the thing I'm testing to engage, because normally if you plug headphones into something like this, the circuit is not engaged and you just hear silence. And interestingly, with the W4, you hear a very tiny amount of electrical noise, but a very tiny bit more if you have the digital silence playing. However, with the GoBar Kensei, if I don't have IEM match on, even if the volume is very low, there is a huge amount of noise and even some beeping and other stuff going on. And you definitely need to switch in the IEM match to work with something like sensitive IEMs. That was quite interesting. And you think, well, doesn't that translate into different performance with full-sized headphones? Well, if you have very sensitive full-sized headphones, and there are a lot out there, your regular Meze or what have you, for example, or Focal Utopias or something like that, it isn't such a big deal. But if you start getting into, say, Dank-like audio headphones, which tend to be lower impedance and lower sensitivity, then it's pretty much the same as all these dongle DACs. There's only so much in terms of power and reserve they can hold for dynamics, since you can't fit large capacitors in there. And the result is the same thing. The soundstage sounds a little bit compressed, and the sound ends up sounding a little bit forced. In other words, it's straining a little bit. It doesn't lose composure so much, like it doesn't clip, because it doesn't seem to get loud enough to do that. But in all these devices, it doesn't sound as open as and expansive as something like a full-size desktop amplifier. If I'm playing Massive Attack's Ritual Spirit, which is from the Ritual Spirit EP, that ends up sounding kind of shouty and irritating out of these devices, whereas with a full-size headphone amp, you just don't have that so much. And it's a particular aspect of that track that it becomes more irritating the lower the quality of the amplification is. Overall, though, the main thing about the GoBar Kensei is, if we just remove the plug, is it's heavy versus the other two. I mean, this is not completely, the W4 isn't completely lightweight, and of course the QX13 isn't a great deal lighter, but it's actually fairly comparable. But the GoBar Kensei, holy crap, this is a beast. And if you don't need the crazy weight and you want half the price, I just go for the regular GoBar, because you just lose the K2 HD, which I don't think adds a significant amount, except maybe a slight harmonic sound to the tuning overall. So in the end, the Kensei seems a little bit crazy, and I don't know how much my friend paid for this. I hope he didn't pay full retail for it. But in the end, yeah, maybe a regular GoBar might be comparable to something like the QX13, or the QX13 has way more features in terms of what you can do with it. And of course it has the external power, which puts it a step above the others, simply because you can power more stuff with it. So it was interesting trying the GoBar Kensei. I mean, if it does sound nice and euphonic and pleasant to listen with, I do kind of like it a lot. The only thing was that needing to use the IEM match to get IEM, for sensitive IEMs. With full-sized headphones, it was actually just pleasant to listen with, or even most of the regular stuff I have. Also, if you do have a GoBar Kensei and you have been using it, do let me know in the comments what you think of it. How has it been going for you? Because I've only had this in briefly before I have to give it back to my friend. And that would also help other people who are interested in it. And I'd like to hear from you. So do post a comment below. As always, thanks once again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you at CanJam. A friend of mine, if you have seen, where can we start with this? God, this thing is a fingerprint magnet. I have to constantly polish it. Oh, my fingerprint is showing all over the video. Anyway, this is the GoBar Kensei.